The light in the medical bay buzzed overhead, cold and white, the kind that stripped skin of color and made everything feel hollow. Valen sat motionless on the steel examination bench, her feet flat on the floor, hands resting on her thighs. The display panel flickered, then stabilized, casting a soft green glow across her broad shoulders. Incompatible for reproduction. The words hung in the air, final and unblinking. Not even the courtesy of a sound. Just a line of sterile text delivered without cruelty because cruelty, like empathy, required effort. No one looked her in the eye. Not the technician who input her scans, not the physician who pretended to review. Them. They didn't have to say it. They never did. She'd heard it whispered 100 times. Too big. Wrong dimensions. Primitive design. The others, Threxel females engineered for this colony cycle, were smaller, sleeker. Designed to appeal. They fit into chairs without creaking. They curled into sleep pods without needing modification. They didn't tower in corridors or dent bulkhead railings with their hips by accident. They didn't get assigned to the lower decks because their presence made others uneasy. Valen was born before the edits. Before the reshaping of their kind into something palatable. She had not been chosen. She had been inherited. And no one wanted what was left behind. She stood when dismissed, ducking. Beneath the low exit frame. Her shadow loomed long across the corridor walls, distorted by the flickering lights. Voices quieted when she passed, not out of respect, but habit. People spoke of her like a tool left out in the rain, useful in a storm. Embarrassing when dry. The elevator hissed as it took her down, deeper into the veins of the outpost. This part of the station always smelled of ozone and metal. The underbelly, where engines roared and machines screamed, and no one cared if you didn't smile. Here, at least, she could exist. Functional, tolerated. She hefted plasma coils onto racks with ease, her fingers thick and calloused, nails dulled by years of wear. She could lift what mechs needed harnesses for. No one thanked her. They just logged her hours and gave her next day's assignments. Her quarters were nothing more than a maintenance closet turned personal space. A cot, a sink, a vent that wheezed in winter and dripped in summer. She didn't decorate it. Didn't name it. But every night, when the station dimmed and the white noise of power grids lulled the outpost into uneasy sleep, she sat cross-legged on the floor and let her hand rest against her abdomen. There was no life there, only breath. Only longing. She imagined a small weight curled in her arms. Not because she was told she should, but because something ancient and silent inside her had never stopped aching for it. A child, soft-skinned, warm, her child. Or someone else's. It didn't matter. The dream was the same. She would hold. Not crush. Protect. Not destroy. Give. Not break. But when she opened her eyes, there was nothing but shadow. She leaned against the wall, forehead pressed to cool metal. The station hummed around her, vast and indifferent. No tears came. They never did. She had no room for softness in a world that never offered any in return. The power conduit hissed as it sparked against metal, casting sharp flickers of blue light across the hallway. Valen didn't flinch. She stood in the steam-clouded gloom of Subdeck 6, holding the damaged piping in place with her bare hands while others scrambled for tools. Her skin, thick as old bark, absorbed the heat without complaint. She'd stopped feeling it years ago. Pain didn't matter when your worth was measured by how much you could carry, how much you could fix, how long you could endure without needing rest or relief. Above her, the emergency lights blinked red in slow, pulsing intervals. Broken pulse. Like the dying rhythm of a machine too tired to keep lying. Someone barked a command through the static. She obeyed it, of course. She always did, but he didn't. He moved differently from the others. Human, smaller than her by at least 2 heads. but not afraid. That was the first thing she noticed. He didn't sidestep when she passed, didn't hesitate to hand her a tool. He didn't flinch when her shadow stretched long and strange across his face, just worked beside her, silent, efficient, and strangely gentle. His name was Kaz. She read it on his patch. The first time he passed her a diagnostic chip, he didn't offer a smile, didn't fill the air with forced chatter like the others. He simply nodded once when she took it, then returned to rewiring the coolant lines. It was nothing. And it was everything. The next day, he was there again, adjusting a control panel with one knee braced against the wall, grease smudged across his cheekbone. When she stepped in to lift the access hatch, he didn't move away. He didn't even look up, just handed her a stabilizer like it was normal. Like she was normal. For 3 days, this continued. No introductions, no questions, just presence. She found herself watching the way his fingers moved over old circuits, careful, exact, like they understood fragility. She'd never known fingers like that. On the 4th day, everything broke. An unmanned drone fell from the service rail, spinning out of control, its thrusters shorting in bursts of flame and pressure. Valen heard the scream before she saw him, the human caught under a collapse of twisted hull and severed cable. The others scattered, shouting. Alarm shrieked. Smoke filled the hull. She moved before thought, ripped the panel from its bolts, lifted the wreckage with both arms, muscles locked, bones strained. Heat licked at her arms. Kaz lay pinned beneath, blood on his temple, eyes open but dazed. She could feel the weight of the drone pressing against her collarbone, but she held. It held it because if she let go, he'd die. And not one other soul had stepped forward to help. Move, she growled, voice deep and cracked from disuse. He blinked, then crawled out with effort. Only once he was clear did she let go. The wreckage hit the ground with a sound like thunder. The hull went quiet except for the whine of failing systems and the hiss of her breath. He looked up at her. For the first time, really looked. You saved me, he said. She turned away. Not out of shame, but fear. Not of him, but of the strange warmth in his voice. It was a tone she didn't recognize. Not command, not disgust, not obligation. Something softer. She expected him to disappear after that. Most did. People didn't. Like being reminded how much they owed the thing they feared. But Kaz didn't disappear. The next night, he was waiting in the lower corridor, crouched beside a shattered vent, trying to weld the frame shut with a cracked torch. She paused. He looked up, said nothing. Then he held out the torch. Handle first. She took it. They worked in silence again, side by side, breath fogging in the cold. Once, her clawed fingers brushed his when he passed her the metal clamps. He didn't pull away. The moment stretched too long, and she drew her hand back like she'd touched something dangerous. Maybe she had in her quarters that night. She couldn't sleep. The memory of his voice echoed in the quiet. You saved me. No one had ever said that to her before. No one had ever looked at her like she was more than muscle and mistake. Kaz had. She curled beneath her thin blanket, staring at the metal ceiling, and for the first time in a long while, wondered what it might feel like to be seen, truly seen, and not have the world recoil. Beneath her breastbone, something stirred. Not hope, not yet. But the absence of hopelessness. A crack in the silence. The ceiling lights in Subdeck 6 had been dim for days, and no one had bothered to fix them. That was the way of things here. Unless something leaked, sparked, or exploded, it was left to rust. Forgotten spaces for forgotten people. But tonight, the shadows felt heavier, thick with a kind of waiting. Like the outpost itself held its breath, Valen moved through the corridor with her usual silence. Heavy steps muffled by the dust and oil-streaked floor. She just finished a shift realigning the cooling tanks in generator row alone, as always. Her arms ached, but she didn't mind the pain. It grounded her. reminded her she was real. A faint hum echoed from around the bend. Not mechanical. Voices. She stopped. The tone was sharp, condescending. Human. Her body tensed as she crept closer, careful to stay within the shadows. Around the corner, half hidden behind stacked crates, she saw them. 2 senior engineers, both in crisp station whites, standing near a holotable. The flickering blue light illuminated their faces as they reviewed some document. Kaz's name was on the file. "You've seen where he's been spending his off hours?" The older one sneered. "Lower 6, with that thing." "He claims it's for maintenance assessments," the other said. "But come on, you really think he's down there for diagnostics? It's disgusting. Fraternizing with one of them. I don't care how useful it is, she's a failed prototype. Built like a tank and twice as obsolete. He's risking a lot. Genetics board finds out, he's done. And if she's broken like they say, God's help him if she ever turns violent." They laughed. Valen stood frozen, rage a cold spike behind her ribs. She knew she was watched, measured, but this was different. This wasn't just suspicion. This was the sound of someone sharpening a knife behind your back. She backed away slowly, careful not to make a sound, and returned to her quarters. Once there, she sat heavily on the floor, breathing hard. Kaz was in danger, not because of her actions, not because she'd harmed anyone, but because he hadn't recoiled, because he dared to treat her like a person, and the system couldn't allow that. Hours passed. Maybe more. Eventually there was a soft knock at her door. 1 knock, then 2. A pause. She knew that pattern. Valen opened it, and there he stood, Kaz, damp from station mist, eyes tired but alert. "Can I come in?" he asked, voice low. Stepped aside. The room was barely big enough for both of them to stand. Still, he didn't seem to mind. He sat cross-legged on the floor like it was normal, like sitting beside a creature with shoulders twice his width and claws that could slice. Metal was just another quiet evening. "They're talking," she said without looking at him. "About you. About me." He nodded. "I know." Her gaze snapped toward him. He met her eyes. Didn't flinch. "I heard them too," he continued. "On the coms, they tapped the logs. They're looking for a reason to remove me. Or you, maybe both." Valen exhaled slowly. "I should go. Leave the outpost. It would protect you." He leaned forward, voice sharper now. "No, you don't understand. I do." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a data chip. Slid it across the floor to her. "I ran a private scan. Your medical logs. The real ones. Not the ones they doctor before review." She hesitated. Picked it up. When she plugged it into the wall console, the screen blinked. Her pulse thudded as lines of text filled the interface. Fertility, potential, viable genetic risk, within acceptable thresholds, bone density, optimal hormonal levels, stable status, fully capable of gestation. Room spun. She stared at the screen. UNMOVING. Then she whispered, "They said I'd break the child. That I was too heavy, too unnatural." Kaz didn't speak for a moment. Then, quietly, "They lied." Valen turned toward him, mouth open, heart roaring. "You were never broken," he said. The silence between them cracked. She felt it. Not in her ears, in her bones. Her hands trembled. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "You could walk away." "You should. Because I've seen what you carry. Because I've seen how you move like the world has tried to crush you and failed." His voice lowered, steady, unflinching. "Because I believe you were meant for more than lifting metal and hiding in corners." Valen looked down at her thick palms. They had never trembled like this before. "There's a place," he added. "A chamber below the old waste processors. It's off-grid. Unused. Dream space protocol could be initiated there. We'd have to do it illegally, but we'd know the truth. Your body. Your choice. Her breath caught no one had ever given her a choice before. And now, here he was, offering her not a cure, not a pity, but a door to something bigger than the pain to something alive. The access tunnel beneath the waste processors was older than anything else on the outpost. Its walls were thick with mineral stains, its air cold and heavy, humming faintly with power that had long since been rerouted. It hadn't been listed on the schematics for years, buried beneath layers of structural neglect and bureaucratic forgetfulness, which made it perfect. Valen stood at the threshold, her massive frame nearly brushing the low-hanging pipework. Beside her, Kaz keyed in the final override sequence. The rusted door groaned, not like a machine but like a wounded animal, and slid open to reveal a chamber bathed in dim amber light. Inside, the old dream space interface waited a relic from it. A time when biolinks were formed through neural resonance, not regulated permission slips. It was meant to map and synchronize two consciousnesses for purposes of reproduction. It had been banned for Threxel females like Valen. Condemned as risky after the redesigns, she stepped inside slowly, her boots crunching softly against dust-coated grates. The chamber was circular, domed, with a faint pulse coming from the core console. The resonance pads, twin slabs of synthstone, were embedded into the floor, waiting for bodies that the system could learn from. Match 2. Echo with Kaz looked around, breath clouding in the cold. It's still active. Valen turned toward him, uncertain. What if it doesn't work? He met her gaze. Then we'll leave, together. But we have to know. She didn't move. Fear wasn't in her blood, but something deeper was doubt. Doubt that had been taught to her like scripture recited by every official, echoed by every silence, every turn back too big. Too dense. Wrong design. Incapable. Unnatural. She'd never questioned it. Not really but now. Now someone stood beside her and asked her to try. She removed her outer jacket and lay down on the pad. It groaned beneath her weight but held. Her heart pounded so loud she could hear it in her teeth. Kaz lay opposite her. The system flickered to life. Lines of soft golden code sweeping across the walls. Sync initiated. Primary. Threxel Bioform Legacy Class. Secondary. Human-compatible donor. : sequencing ... Her mind flooded with warmth and light sudden. Electric. She gasped, her back arching slightly as the dream space reached into her, brushing the edges of her thoughts like gentle fingers. She felt him. Kaz. Not his voice, not his face, him, his steadiness, his fear, his hope. Memories flickered past her greasy tools, a childhood in orbit, a mother who sang to the stars and vanished before he turned 8. And he felt her. The long walks through corridors, pretending not to hear laughter, the cold, clinical pronouncements of genetic irrelevance. The memory of her palms pressed to her stomach in the dark, and in the center of that storm something else. Not data. Not programming. Want. The system pulsed. Receptive match found. Hormonal. Response. Active. Vital stability. Within tolerance. Candidate viable for conception. Valen gasped aloud. Her body, her bones, all of it shivered like something ancient had stirred. Her hand flew to her belly, not from pain, but from a heat blooming inside her that was not hers alone. : Transfer complete. The light dimmed. Silence returned. Kaz rose. Slowly, pale and shaking. Valen, are you? She was trembling. Not with weakness. Not with fear. With knowing. I felt it, she said. I felt it happen. Kaz stared at her, stunned. Then it worked. It really, a shrill tone sliced through the air. Emergency. Sirens. They both froze. Kaz cursed under his breath and ran to the console. A red feed was blinking. External security tripwire. Someone's coming, he said. They've traced. The energy spike. We have to move? Valen stood slowly, muscles still pulsing with aftershocks. Her hand lingered at her abdomen. It wasn't showing. Not yet, but something lived there. Something real. Go, she said. I'm not leaving without you. Her jaw clenched. Then move. They raced down the tunnel, each step hammering into metal like a countdown. Above, in the upper decks, command would already be mobilizing. Surveillance would be accessed. Names pulled. Charges prepared. Unauthorized use of reproductive protocols. Tampering with banned Threxel hardware. Biological risk contamination, but none of that mattered. Now not compared to what she carried. They emerged near the waste compression chute, breathless and sweat-drenched. Kaz keyed in another bypass. Behind them, footsteps echoed. Guards. Valen grabbed him, one arm wrapping around his ribs. He yelped as she lifted him and leapt into the chute. They plunged into darkness, gravity wrenching them down a narrow shaft slick with condensation. They landed hard, rolled, came up gasping. Behind them, the chute sealed. They were alone in the maintenance cavern below the colony. Mud, cables, darkness. But safe. Kaz groaned beside her. That was reckless. She looked down at him, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. You're alive? He laughed, winded. So are you. Valen didn't respond. She was staring at her hands. They trembled again. Not? From impact. From something blooming inside her. Not hope. Not yet. But life. Real life. The cavern stretched out around them like a rib cage, old metal ribs rising from the earth and wrapping around darkness that had not known light in decades. A silence lived here, thick, humming, pulsing beneath the floor. The kind of silence that made voices feel like sacrilege. Even Kaz didn't speak at first. They moved carefully through the broken remains of a power relay station, long since consumed by rust and roots. The outpost had built itself upward and outward over the years, abandoning what it deemed inefficient. And down here, beneath all that sterile forgetting, was where they landed. The place beneath the place, where no one looked, where no one cared. Except now, something inside Valen did care. They found shelter in a collapsed server room, twisted panels forming a half-dome against the dripping stone. There was no light, only the soft glow of Kaz's emergency beacon casting long shadows against the walls. It didn't feel like safety, but it felt like pause, like breath. Valen sat slowly, leaning against the wall, her frame stiff from the fall and from something else, something new. Her hand drifted to her stomach again, unthinking. Kaz noticed. Anything feel wrong? She shook her head. No. Just different, he nodded, rubbing a cut on his arm. Your body's adjusting. Valen didn't respond. Her thoughts were louder than the silence. She had grown used to absence. But now, inside her, something wasn't absent. It was forming, real, hers. They'll be hunting us, she said finally. I know. They'll come hard, fast. If they can't erase it, they'll study it, dissect it. Kaz looked at her, eyes tired but unshaken. Then we don't let them. We're not enough. You are. She turned away, breath ragged. It wasn't courage she lacked. It was belief. Belief that someone like her, designed for bulk and labor, declared incompatible and discarded, could be trusted to carry something delicate. Something sacred. They called me a risk, she whispered, said I was too big. That I'd crush. A child before it ever breathed. Kaz moved closer, not touching, but near enough that his warmth cut through the cavern chill. They were wrong. How do you know? He tilted his head. Because you haven't crushed me yet. She huffed, surprised by the sound. It wasn't quite a laugh. But it was more than nothing. He held up a small black disc. "Signal jammer," he said. "Temporary. It'll block drones for maybe an hour at a time, long enough to keep us moving." She watched him fiddle with the edges. "You planned this?" "I hoped for it." Valen stared at him, disbelieving. "You hoped I'd be pregnant?" He didn't blink. "I hoped you'd choose to try. I hoped you'd believe you could." Her throat tightened. That word again, choose. It tasted like something forbidden. Something real. A sudden noise above a whine of movement. Drone engines, faint, circling. Kaz shut off the beacon. Everything dropped into pitch. They crouched, breathing in sync, listening as the search pattern passed overhead. Distant, but closing. Valen's muscles coiled with instinct. Not fear, readiness. She would not run again. Not for shame. Not for survival. This time, she would protect. When the drone sound faded, Kaz placed a hand on her forearm. Not a command, not a suggestion. Just a presence. "There's another way out," he said. "Through the collapsed water shafts. Old Terra tunnels lead into the ridge. We can hide there. Longer, safer." Valen nodded. "But we'll have to go through the dark. Can you manage that?" "I was born in it." They gathered what they could. A filtered blanket. The med patch kit. Protein packs. The jammer. Valen moved slowly, testing each step. She could feel it, small but steady, the change inside her. Not just biology. Not just cells dividing, hope not imagined. Not crushed. Growing. They descended into the shafts, the world above fading into distant echo. Narrow tunnels pressed. In around them, walls weeping condensation. Air thick with mineral dust. At one point, Kaz stumbled. Valen caught him easily, one hand gripping his waist to steady him. He glanced at her and smiled despite himself. "What?" "You're strong," he said softly. "But that's not the part that scares them." "No? It's that you feel. They can't control that." She let the silence stretch after that, not because she didn't believe him, but because she was trying to. When they reached the ridge tunnel, there was a small chamber carved into stone. It had been a sensor relay once, long dead. Now it was a pocket of quiet. They collapsed inside. The weight of the journey pressing down like gravity. Kaz sat against the wall and pulled out the thin roll of survival blankets. Valen eased herself down beside him. Her hand once again found her middle. A flicker. Barely there. Kaz saw her eyes widen. "What is it?" "It moved." His face softened. "Already?" She nodded, slowly. Eyes locked on some place beyond the walls. Outside, the colony hunted. But inside this room, something had chosen to live. The wind on the ridge howled like a wounded animal, battering the broken terrain with dust and memory. Jagged metal roots jutted from the hillside, remnants of the old terraforming towers that once tried to make this planet bloom. Now they stood, hollow and rusted, their spines broken by storms and neglect, whispering secrets to anyone desperate enough to listen. Valen crouched behind a fallen beam, one hand braced against the wet stone, the other pressed tight over her belly. The movement had grown stronger, gentle, rhythmic. No longer just a flicker. It was becoming something undeniable, not a dream, not a mistake. Life. Behind her, Kaz scanned the valley below with a fractured lens scope. Heat signatures moved in the fog, organized, methodical. A search team, armored. 2 drones circling overhead like silent birds of prey. They'd found the dream space logs. Kaz cursed under his breath. They'll triangulate this side of the ridge by nightfall. Valen's jaw tightened. Then we go before night. Into the crater? She nodded. The wrecks hide more than shadows. If we make it to the boneyard, they won't follow. The boneyard. A forbidden stretch of land, littered with the rusting carcasses of crashed ships and experimental habitats, deemed unstable, unsuitable for colonization. No one went there, not unless they had nothing left to lose. Kaz didn't argue. He packed quickly. They left just before dusk. As they moved down the ridgeline, the terrain grew more twisted. Vines clung to old rebar. Puddles steamed with geothermal heat. Valen led the way, her boots steady even where the earth cracked and crumbled. Kaz followed, close but silent. It wasn't until they reached the second ridge shelf that they saw it. A drone. Low-flying, scanning. Kaz ducked behind a boulder. Valen froze. Her instincts screamed to run, to shield her body, to vanish, but it was too late. The drone paused, locked position. Light blinked red. They've seen us. Valen didn't wait. She lifted a metal slab from the wreckage at her feet and threw it. It struck the drone midair with a metallic shriek, sending it tumbling into a burst of flame. Pieces rained down across the rocks, burning out before they hit soil. We have 3 minutes, Kaz said, already running. They made it to the crater edge with seconds to spare. Then the alarms began to shriek across the landscape. Not from the drone, but from the station itself. Kaz turned, eyes wide. They activated containment. Valen grabbed his arm. What does that mean? They're not just hunting us. They're sealing us in. Above, the sky lit up with grid lines, energy netting stretching between towers like a cage. The outpost was preparing to shut the perimeter. Anything inside would be marked as hostile organic contamination. Valen's heartbeat roared in her ears. Not fear, fury. They're trying to erase us, she said. Kaz nodded. And the proof you carry. They pushed forward into the crater's heart. The boneyard loomed ahead, massive skeletons of fallen ships tangled like ancient bones. Atmosphere. Scrubbers, ruptured domes, forgotten tech still blinking in silent loops. They climbed through a shattered entry hatch. Inside, it was darker than the tunnels. Quieter than death. Kaz collapsed behind a crate, panting. We won't make it through the east gate. It's sealed. Valen didn't answer. She stood in the center of the ruin, surrounded by ghost machines, and felt the child move again. A pulse. Small, steady. Then we don't run anymore. Kaz looked up, confused. What do you mean? Valen turned toward him, something new in her eyes. Not just anger. Not just endurance. Resolve. They want to erase me because they're afraid. Afraid of what it means if I can create life. If I'm not a mistake. They fear what they can't rewrite, Kaz said. Valen stepped forward, her voice cold fire. Then I'll show them what they tried to erase. The old ship's signal relay still worked. Barely. Kaz rigged a broadcast short range, encrypted, with old Alliance frequencies. Valen stood before the lens, her shoulders bare, her hands pressed gently to her stomach. This is Valen. Legacy Threxel, declared unfit, discarded. The recorder buzzed. She kept speaking. I was told my body was wrong. Too big to be gentle, too strong to be trusted, too different to carry life. She looked down. Her fingers moved, but they were wrong. Her glowing eyes met the camera again. There is life in me now, real, growing, and it's not a threat. It's a beginning. I will not be erased. I will not let you take what is mine. Kaz sent the transmission just as the scanners pinged. The wreck died outside, lights grew closer. Valen didn't move. When the first armored figures arrived, she stepped forward and stood tall. Not a threat. Not a weapon. Not a mistake. A mother. The soldiers moved like shadows in the fog, 8 of them, maybe 10. Armor-clad, helmets sealed, rifles aimed low but ready. They approached the boneyard wreck cautiously, their boots crunching over metal debris and cracked earth. Above them, the drone net pulsed with soft light, sealing the world into a cage of silence. Inside the ruin, Valen didn't flinch. She stood in the center of the chamber, framed by twisted metal and half-dead circuitry, her body still and massive in the dim light. One hand rested over her stomach, the other curled loosely by her side. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't bare her teeth. She simply waited. Behind her, Kaz worked in silence. His fingers moved over the old broadcast node, rerouting the signal to deep space relays. The message she had spoken, raw, defiant, alive, was no longer just bouncing around the colony net. Now it was headed for the outer satellites, for every ship and settlement within 2 parsecs. Truth couldn't be unspoken once it echoed through the Chithium stars. But the soldiers didn't care about truth. Step forward, the lead officer called, voice sharp through the helmet speaker. Hands where we can see them. Valen did not move. Kaz rose slowly beside her. We've committed no violence, he said. We've made no demands. Unauthorized biological reproduction using banned protocols is a violation of interspecies. Regulation code 38-9, the officer replied. Your broadcast was flagged. You are both under arrest. Kaz swallowed, but his gaze didn't waver. Valen stepped forward. Her voice, low and clear, rolled through the chamber like thunder under ice. I'm not leaving this place in chains. The soldiers raised their weapons. Stand down, the officer barked. Valen held her ground. If you fire, you'll kill the first naturally conceived Threxel-human hybrid in recorded history. The silence that followed was long, heavy. You're lying, someone muttered. Kaz stepped beside her, hand raised. We have medical proof. We submitted the full diagnostic stream to the satellite logs. Every lab in the sector will have it by morning. Another voice, quieter, younger. What? If she's telling the truth? Orders are clear, the officer growled. Contain and extract. Valen stared at him. You think your fear makes you powerful, but you've built your power on silence. On people like me disappearing before anyone can ask if we were worth saving. She stepped forward again. Her height cast a shadow over the front line. I won't disappear, the standoff stretched taut. Behind the soldiers, more lights flickered. A second team was arriving, higher clearance. More weapons. Kaz leaned close to her. If we stay, they'll tear us apart. Valen looked down at her hand on her stomach. The child inside her stirred again, soft but strong. Then we don't stay, she whispered. And she ran, not blindly, not in fear. With purpose. She grabbed Kaz's hand and charged through the side panel of the ruin, shoving the metal frame aside with raw strength. Alarm screamed. Gunfire sparked behind them, tracer rounds slicing through the smoke, but Valen didn't stop. She leapt across the broken ground, boots slamming into old scaffold walkways, arms shielding Kaz as plasma bolts exploded around them. Her body, built for labor, now became something more, a shield, a vessel, a force of nature. They reached the ravine edge. The old service lift still hung on rusted cables. Kaz looked at her, breathing hard. It won't hold. She wrapped both arms around him, stepping onto the platform. Then it learns. And she jumped. The lift groaned and screamed, cables snapping one by one, but they fell slower, slowed by friction and luck and maybe something else. They crashed into the lower basin in a spray of dust and steam. Alive. Valen groaned. Body bruised but whole. Kaz sat beside her, coughing, eyes wide. You okay? She nodded. He reached toward her belly, trembling. And she took his hand and pressed it to the place where life stirred. A soft thump answered. Kaz choked on a breath and smiled through bloodied lips. Still with us. They moved through the tunnels beneath the basin for hours, avoiding heat scans, dodging patrols. Word would spread fast. Every authority in the sector would know by now. They wouldn't stop until she was contained or worse, but something had changed. People started whispering. Stations on the outer belt pinged the outpost, requesting clarification. Medlabs requested data access. Civilian feeds picked up fragments of her speech. The message had gone viral. What began as an act of defiance became something else, a spark. Valen and Kaz fled deeper into the wild zones, across the unregulated lands, building shelter in the bones of fallen satellites and regrown forests. Weeks passed. The bounty on their heads increased. So did their legend. And then quiet. No more soldiers. No more drones. Not because they gave up. But because the world was watching now. A war without bullets had begun. One of questions, of reckonings, and no one wanted to be the first to fire against. A mother and child in the open. Valen gave birth in a cavern of glasstone beneath a glowing waterfall. No machines. No sterilized lights. Only hands, breath, pain, and joy. The child came into the world with amber eyes and human skin. Fingers long and curious, a heartbeat steady and unafraid. Kaz wept when he held her. Valen didn't cry. Not because she wasn't moved, but because, for the first time in her life, her body felt whole. Not too big. Not too wrong. Just enough to carry life. They named her Kaya, after the Threxel word for born under defiance. When the child opened her eyes, she did not cry. She looked at the world like it was hers, and maybe it was. Because the world would change now. Slowly, unevenly, but it would. Valen had not broken the system. She had outlived it. And in her arms, the future breathed.